First, and I realize that the distinguished presiding officer, my friend, the senior senator from Texas, can't respond to what they say, but I wish him a happy new year. And I'm glad we're starting another year where we serve together in this body. I do want to talk about what's happening, though, in the Congress. We're in the 13th day of the Trump shutdown. 13 days that 9 of 15 federal departments, dozens of agencies, have shut their doors. That's 13 days in which hundreds of thousands of Americans have been furloughed or working without pay. 13 days that Americans have been denied government services on which they rely and for which they pay taxes. The president is holding federal government funding hostage in an attempt to force Congress to pay for an ineffective and expensive wall on the southern border, a wall, incidentally, that he promised that Mexico would pay for, promised over and over again. And when everybody knows that's not true, Mexico will not pay for it. Unfortunately, though, the people who are paying for it are the American people. They're paying for the price of the Trump shutdown, and frankly, he doesn't seem to care. Let me give you some examples. Since the shutdown began, our national parks, the treasure of this country, have been left largely unsupervised. The welcome centers are closed. Park rangers have been furloughed. There are few emergency or law enforcement personnel left to police the park or rescue injured guests. That affects visitor safety. It reduces public access. It threatens national and cultural resources and national parks in every part of our country. We're already receiving reports of damage to sensitive lands and national treasures, campgrounds littered with trash, overflowing toilets, locked restrooms. Even where parks remain open, campgrounds and other sites will begin to close because of the obvious health and safety reasons. And then, aside from government, the businesses in gateway communities surrounding our parks, tax-paying businesses, are also paying the price in lost sales and rentals, empty storefronts, as families cancel their plans to visit because the shutdown drags on and on and on. There are a lot of other problems with this. Because of the Trump shutdown, the U.S. Forest Service has curtailed forest thinning and fire prevention projects. Just think of that. Within months of the time the nation is reeling from and dealing with a record-setting fire season. The things that might prevent fires, we can't get in there and work on that. But you also have closed visitor centers, reduced services at campgrounds. Just a few days ago, the Farm Service Agency. If you're a farmer or if you live in a rural community, you know what this is. The Farm Service Agency they shut their doors. That's the agency that supports farmers in rural communities across the country. Now, we came together, Republicans and Democrats, and passed the 2018 Farm Bill, 5-year Farm Bill. I was proud to be one of the conferees of that. I saw both parties work together. We passed it. It's a complex and important bill, but farmers and ranchers need information from that bill right now. Every farmer and rancher will tell you they're planning for the growing season. They're planning, what can they plant? What should they buy? What should they do? But they don't know how the law is going to affect their operations heading into the planting season. Why? Because no one's in the office or staffing the phone to answer these questions or sign up producers for new programs. There's nobody there. Farmers will also not be able to apply for much needed loans that they count on to get started in the year and pay back as a result of their labor during the year. Many farmers, like those in my home state of Vermont, face financial hardship due to the dramatic drop in commodity prices brought on by President Trump's tariffs. They need loans to help pay bills and stay afloat through this winter, as well as prepare for spring planting. With banks not willing to lend to them, not knowing what's going to happen, many rely on the U.S. Department of Agriculture. USDA is their lender of last resort. But it's really become the lender of last resort because the doors are closed and they can't even apply for the loans. There's nobody home. And while the president loudly proclaimed he would provide assistance through the market facilitation programs to help farmers mitigate the financial losses caused by his tariffs as of December 28th, there's no one there to process any new applications for these payments. So the bottom line, well, the president put the tariffs in, we passed legislation to help, but now they're told to fend for themselves because the president is holding the Department of Agriculture and its safety nets hostage to secure funding for his border wall, even though the Department of Agriculture has nothing to do with the border wall, couldn't fund it if they wanted to. And yet, virtually every farmer of every kind in this country is going to be affected by that. And in addition to government services that ground to a halt, an estimated 450,000 employees are working, but they're working without pay. That includes 41,000 federal law enforcement and correctional officers at the Department of Justice, ATF agents, FBI agents, U.S. Marshals, DEA agents. They're not getting paid, but their mortgages still come due. Or if they have tuition payments for their kids, those come due. If they have health care costs, that comes due. And they're told, you show up for work, maybe we'll get around to pay you, and maybe we won't. And then you have 380,000 federal employees also have children, families, bills. They've been furloughed, and they have no guarantee they'll receive back pay when they return to work. Let me give you an idea of who some of these people are. They're 96% of our employees at NASA. I suppose they could sit at home and watch China land their satellite on the backside of the moon. What else does it include? It includes 80% of the National Park Service, 60% of the Department of Commerce, 33% of the Forest Service. And in addition, many federal contractors have discontinued their services, which leaves thousands of employees without work and without a paycheck. Now, this doesn't affect the president, but many of our dedicated federal employees work every day to help our country, and they live paycheck to paycheck. Custodial workers, cafeteria workers, telephone operators, contract specialists, customer service representatives, the people the taxpayers think they can call when they have a question, and now they get no answer. They're employees who have mortgages to pay, they have families to take care of. If this financial disruption comes on the heels of the holiday season, when so many families' budgets are tight, it's even harder to fathom. It's even harder to justify. In fact, I'd say it can't be justified. Most of these federal agencies or these employees who are without a paycheck have absolutely nothing to do with border security. That's the worst part about that. They're not the ones involved with border security, but they're casualties of President Trump's single-minded obsession with walling off our southern border. The president has repeatedly said this is all about border security. Really? Really? Come on, give me a break. His actions have caused the very department charged with securing our borders to be cut off from all funding. 88% of the Department of Homeland Security employees are working without pay. They got to think about how they're going to pay their mortgage, their bills. They're working without pay, and that includes the 54,000 Customs and Border Patrol agents who protect our southern border and our northern border. Many of them are veterans. As of January 1st, roughly 42,000 hardworking, dedicated members of our nation's Coast Guard will be protecting our country without pay. TSA officers, every one of us, when we fly back home to our states, look at these TSA officers. They screened over 2 million passengers and their baggage per day through the holidays, but they're not being paid. They're not being paid. I talked to someone when I flew back from Vermont. It is hurting. One has health care bills. Another has a mortgage. They don't know how they're going to pay it. Now, last week, House Democrats put forward a common sense path to end the Trump shutdown. They introduced a minibus comprised of 6 bipartisan appropriations bills and a continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security. They'll keep it up and running through February 8th. Now, the House is going to vote on both these bills this evening. I expect they'll pass. After all, just a few weeks ago, these same bills passed this Republican-controlled Senate unanimously. So we know the votes are there to pass. So I would urge my friend, the Majority Leader, Senator McConnell, and Senate Republicans to take up these bills expeditiously. The 6-bill minibus is not controversial. Senator Shelby is chairman of the Appropriations Committee, myself as vice chairman of the Appropriations Committee, have both voted for them, as have virtually all members of the Appropriations Committee. Wide bipartisan support in this chamber. In fact, 4 of the 6 bills passed the Senate 92-6. The other 2 were reported out of the Appropriations Committee on nearly unanimous votes. Why? Because they're the product of bipartisan compromise. They provide billions of dollars in new resources to address critical needs of the American people and to protect U.S. national security. So it's irresponsible for the president to hold these 6 bills hostage in order to compel taxpayers to pay for his wall, a wall he falsely promised Mexico would pay for. And if we stop holding them hostage, we could pass these bills, send them to the president for his signature. That would get the vast majority of the federal government back open for the good of the American people. We ought to do that. It also makes sense to pass a continuing resolution for the Department of Homeland Security through February 8th. We did that here in the Senate, Republicans and Democrats alike, and voice voted on December 19th. We should not shut down the very agency responsible for securing our borders over a fight. Well, how's the best way to secure our border? I'll tell you what's not the best way. It's furlough everybody, stop paying them, close down the government. Man, does that make us secure? Of course it does not. Everyone agrees, Republicans and Democrats alike. We need to keep our borders safe and secure. But let's have smart border security that works. New technologies proven to work on the border and our ports of entry, new air and marine assets, and additional personnel were needed. Not a 30-foot medieval wall. I've visited that border. I've seen what's needed. And I know from the professionals who are there what they need. They need a lot of resources, very last of which would be a wall. Now let's recall that before the holidays, the president said he would sign a continuing resolution to February 8th. We had a path forward. We all relied on the president's word. Well, after 24 hours of Fox News and the right-wing pundits criticizing him, apparently his ego was so bruised, he reversed course and broke his word. And here we are, 13 days into a Trump shutdown. It has to end. Madam President, we have a clear, sensible, responsible path forward. I strongly urge the Senate Republicans to support and pass this bipartisan compromise. After all, almost every Republican and every Democrat has voted for these bills. Let's vote for them again and tell the president we'll work on what he needs for border security. We all agree on the need for border security. Let's work on what's the best way for it. But let's not close down the Department of Agriculture. Let's not close down all these other departments that American taxpayers rely on for it.